a lot of the faces here were yesterday on the talk, so I made a last change update of the slides. I don't have much, but I have a lot to say. So I broke down the problem actually that we are facing, and in a place like NDSS, where social systems are networked social systems, create information that it's not just hard to dissect in Jared's session, but also hard to digest by humans. So the problem is that it's not this false information existed before. False information will exist after, as long as we communicate between us. But the problem becomes a problem, and that's again noticed by people, that misinformation is sticky. So what does that mean? It means that the notorious thing that 1,000 times repeated a lie becomes a truth, and social media actually, it's the pretty much the fastest misinformation accelerator for that. So if you want something said 1,000 times, then misinformation gives you that in fraction of seconds, and as such, it creates such a noise that it creates some situation where truth is impersonated by other alternative narratives. And when we speak of social media, I mentioned in private conversations with many participants here, it's that we oftentimes think the mainstream platforms, because they were the ones that were most affected by disinformation campaigns. But under social media, I always assume a broader place where people interact. So it's not just Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, but also new places like TikTok, and places like Discord, and even places like Eve, which is a multiplayer immersive game where people do actually socialize, and through that socialization, they actually not necessarily disseminate truthful and factful information. It happens all the time. Sometimes it's only on news, oftentimes it's not. Tracing what kind of effects it has, I think we're all aware of it. And as I mentioned into my main presentation yesterday, it's been exactly 100 years since the first disinformation campaign affected elections in the UK. So it was a letter that was sent from the Comintern to the UK to tilt the election from the Labour Party towards the Conservatives, and history repeats itself. So it's up to us whether we're going to learn from it, or are we gonna be doomed to even further repeat it. And who is doing this? Pretty much everyone. So pretty much it's a fair game. It's because entry costs are non-existent. You can create as much as accounts as you want, and you can coordinate those accounts wherever you want, and in many ways shuffle and shift and coordinate them. Of course, the main theme, the unavoidable theme of ChatGPT can help you do this. I mentioned again on the hallway track, I mentioned that there is something called 4chan GPT, which is a chat GPT trained on billions of 4chan posts, and that thing spits out very inappropriate and very very trolling kind of content. So how do we deal with that? We try to big platforms try to kind of moderate it. Alternative platforms don't care about it. Other places don't even know that it exists there. We try to do debunking, rebuffing, myth busting, and all of that, and that's good and bad, but still doesn't rectify the problem altogether. So that's why our work revolved around. I started working with usable security interventions or frictions on how to notify people on platforms whether something requires further investigation and should not be accepted as a truth or the face value. And then we realized in not just data analysis, but also with pilot studies that not many people share the same concept of what misinformation is. And as such, the main takeaway is that when you're doing human subject research, it's misinformation is part of the identity of the people. So one thing is for you to ask someone in a user study, what do they think of a password? Or to feel briefly ashamed that they had their dog as a password. But another thing for them to actually evaluate news that certainly has some kind of opinions into it, and for them to reveal what's their opinions about it, because those are not necessarily an easy to change as, for example, a password. And that it's prevalent across all platforms, and it's prevalent across all topics. So now misinformation becomes the lenses that you see everything through it. So this is not a massive paranoia. This is not just something that it's a nuisance, but it's something that actually percolates in the back of the head of the people. So I did studies on multiple platforms, both alternative platforms, both social media mainstream platforms. I'm currently interviewing people on Discord, and all of that is every endeavor has been a different animal. So when I approach doing human subject research in misinformation, I look through 3 dimensions primarily. So the first dimension is a platform dimension. So the perception of the platform matters. How the users you interview perceive the platform. And of it, low-hanging fruit, but certainly a palpable and potent example is Twitter. If you ask people before Elon Musk took over Twitter what they think about it, you will see different distribution between left-leaning and right-leaning people. If you ask them afterwards, they have a little bit of new perception. So, and if you ask them about what do you think about Facebook before Facebook reinstituted Trump's account, their perception about the platforms true to their motive and platforms' ability to affect discourse is different based on events. So that is a confounding factor when you interview people. So you have to, I found through trial and errors, thousands of errors, many interviews have been discarded. One of the reviewer, every time we submit a paper in the last year, we got questions about how did you remove low quality answers. And that's one of this dimension is where you can see that through the answers, they like to get at the platform and not to give you something that it's honest. So they feel that they have not been fairly treated, or information has not been received fair treatment by at least mainstream platforms. That on top of that, when you have a platform, people can find your paper on internet, and they can see when you start asking them questions, especially in alternative social media platforms, they will be a little bit of cognizant of the fact that you're more towards lean towards mainstream places, or their perception is like that. So you have to. We found out again through trials and errors that you have to dispel any kind of favorism up front, because that also affects the quality of the answers that you get. And not just it is also you have to detach yourself that you have no endorsements. Otherwise, that becomes everything is internalized. So we've learned it through like analysis, and then seeing in the end, and then how people actually give their responses. So the second dimension is what misinformation constitutes as a dimension. People look at it through different eyes, which was the topic of my paper, and as such, you have to be aware of what potential alternatives or competing interpretations people could have of your question. So that requires a very careful towing the line of what you would like to ask, first with experiences, and second, every time we've interviewed, I don't think that we've met, I think couple of subjects, participants that I interviewed in the hacktivist community that revolve around internet activism and all of that, did not mention that they have not encountered or that they're not engaged. So everyone likes to tell a story, and everyone also sees through that kind of story. And as I already said, it is a self-image. The more you encounter it, and the more you see it, the more your experience is shaped by it, and that defines what you will tell or what you will not tell. How honest will you be in your answer? So this is not just about, like, I use the password example because we've run password studies or social engineering studies. It's one thing for you to have something that it's not necessarily it's yours, but you can easily change your opinion and your attraction. It's not that easy to change, and that affects how you do it. And I'm saying all of these elements because you have to justify all of these things in front of the IRB gods. So that's mostly important. And the third dimension is participant dimension. They engage per platform, per topic. So misinformation became like a TV. So if I want to do COVID, I switch to Gab. If I want to do the balloon conspiracy, I switch to Getter. If I want to do some religious related conspiracy that has to do with killings or something that it's not necessarily in the main focus, I switch to 4chan or I switch to Discord. So that has to, it also affects what kind of topic you're looking into it, because it's not every topic is not created equal, and many people might, as I talked yesterday, might analytically look into things, think about statistics. A lot of misinformation is about misinterpretation and throwing just numbers to look smart. But also people heuristically dismiss things, and they dismiss things heuristically. There's a lot of false positives and false things. Jared?
That was really interesting what you said about users having a topic that they're interested in and then going to a platform to get their conspiracy fill. Is that user driven? Like, are there some topics that are just more prevalent and more discussed on particular platforms than others, or is it just the user happens to have I don't even know, like they have a 4chan account, so they do all their conspiracy stuff on 4chan, but other people do it on Twitter?
So that's a very good question. The structure of the underlying network structure of the platforms is different. For example, if you go on Parler and Getter, you have centralized accounts that are megaphones. Like, for example, Sean Hannity. And if you want the current latest thing that you might have seen on a TV in a passing, you go there. The platforms are designed in a way, like, for example, Platform and Getter and Gap, it's hard for you to search for accounts. You have to kind of find through a hashtag, through a topic. But if you actually just follow, like, and it recommends you to follow, and it recommends you those main accounts. So there are places where you can just switch in, and you don't have to search for it. It's just from the few accounts that the platform recommended to you to look into it. If you want, if you have to search for it, then you go to Twitter or you go to 4chan to wild boards. And if you are very prolific in it, then Discord and places like that. So someone has to recommend it to you, and sure enough, that kind of happens. So platforms do drive how that content is distributed, but nonetheless, users are aware of it and they look for it in that way.
Would you say that some topics are non-uniformly distributed across different platforms, or you can find every conspiracy on?
You could, but the different flavors there are. Like, for example, if you go for a certain conspiracy, if you go for Quanon, there are a lot of stuff that it's immediately removed from Twitter or immediately quarantined, and there are a lot of videos that are just pop at you if you open just Getter or Gap. It immediately pops at you, like videos that will absolutely never appear on Twitter or Facebook.
For what it's worth, and this is entirely personal experience from years ago, but my experience was that 4chan would generate more things because Anons were much more interested in generating ridiculous stories, which then other organizations would take at face value.
Yeah, that's true. And 4chan encourages participation to make it even more. So the evolution of a theory probably goes there.
That's actually an interesting feature of 4chan, is because the software is so awful. For years, it's created communities. Various sub-channels will create their own infrastructure and community outside of it to maintain a kind of organizational memory.
Yeah.
So
I guess maybe I'd also be curious, how do you deal with this when you're trying to do research? Like how do you get? Does that impact like what you use for like maybe a representative sample set, or like?
So well, I have it here. I can perfect segue. Yeah. Okay. So one thing too, as I mentioned, this information is free. Okay. So it if it's a paywall, and if what I'm trying to capture with this slide is that this information has a built-in entertainment into it, and people do look for it. As in our studies, we found and confirmed that that's entertainment, but that's how it actually started, right? To 4chan and Anon started it as trolling, where they post ridiculous things on, let's say, a funeral wake sites and make fun of it. So it still maintains that kind of thing. People are attracted for that part. So I broke it down the talk into a typical research design thing. So I start with assumption limitations and delimitations. Assumptions, like you could assume that information literacy, which means that you are able to find information that you're looking for, but that might not be true. So my limit, like I have to disclose this is US centered. Okay, so I definitely know, or most definitely know, that a replication study of everything I've done, if I do it, let's say in Austria, will be a little bit probably different and contextual to the political context that it's there. But nonetheless, information literacy is important, and social media literacy is important to know and to ask up front, to be able to know that people actually are able to look and find information what they're looking for. Not just to type QAnon and then for them to get some loose leaf tea that helps for, I don't know, belly pain, and then proceed to that. So for them to be able to follow up information and interact with it on social media. Exposure, again, there's a subjective designation. And lived experiences. Many people we have found have absolutely could not wait to express grievances about how they have been banned, how they have been moderated, and how unfair was that they happened to them, and on both left and right. In one of our other papers, we interviewed a far left lesbian outfit that was on Getter, which was strange for us to find it, but they told us, well, they kicked us out of Twitter, so this was the place where we had to camp, which was strange for us. We're like, well, but you do despise this kind of, who is behind this? They're like, well, but we certainly can interact better and be hidden from searches while also entertain ourselves with wild narratives. Limitations are very important because there are expiry dates on falsehoods. There are expiry dates on rumors that could prove. So there could be a falsehood that might be proven truth. And I'm not suggesting subjectively that something could happen, but think of the fact that Department of Energy released a low confidence report that the COVID virus might have originated from a lab. So for all of us, low confidence means low confidence, right? But for my dad, low confidence doesn't mean anything. It's like Department of Energy, COVID, lab, Wuhan, right? So for whatever it was, it ordinary person mind that might have been a falsehood now, so certainly gets to have a truthful flavor, and that's something that has to be taken account as a limitation. And the other way around, right? Facts proven wrong, right? Research, we've thought that there is a connection between X and Y. The new evidence suggests that there is not, especially for medical research. So that's a normal thing for us, and we as a scientist understand that that's the case. But many people don't, and because of collapse of contexts on social media, that is perceived as, I told you so. And platform interference, also platform does automatic moderation. Mainstream platforms do automatic moderation. They do a lot of mistakes. Like for example, once they have, on Twitter, they have automatically removed every content that had the word Memphis into it. And and I happen to know, because they kicked out one famous soccer player from France. His name is Memphis. So he was a huge complaint about, like, why did you kick out my account? I'm a soccer player. I don't know anything about misinformation. It has to deal with some kind of Memphis is for some reason got into the moderation platform, and that, again, back to what I said, creates an impression of unfairness, and that impression trickles down into answers. And of course, the things that are closely guarded and monitored, they do change and do add new evidence, and people are like attracted to them when you delimit yourself. For example, you can do a lot of misinformation studies on main topics, but we have currently done stuff that's, for example, on abortion misinformation. So something that it's like you could have anticipated when the Supreme Court had to make a decision, but after it made a decision, then you have tons and tons of abortion pills, abortion teas, misinformation that starts to float around. The people hardly you can see it, but then nonetheless is there, and it's in the same way it could transfer into very much a physical harm. So you should be aware of that. I've done all of this. So surveys, it's as I said, internalists, people do fear retribution. So in terms of artifact revealing, I would like to write into the paper about that, how I would be cognizant to see which parts of the information I could reveal, so people do not say that it's out and someone else is doing research on their personal opinions. Especially, I showed you a citation yesterday that there was like a woman who said, like, I blocked my husband on Facebook. So I don't want, like, there are ramifications of the fact that someone can see themselves as someone else while using but I am completely open into finding a ways to share artifacts. People, when you ask people about misinformation, they talk a lot, they're opinionated, and they like to say a lot. One important, very, very crucial thing that I would like to expand on in my paper, it's the misinformation is deception. And what could happen as a problem is that I could manufacture misinformation into my lab and show it to 200 people, right? And some of them could use that and post it on Twitter. I have no control afterwards where that thing is going to go. So that is something that I could not prevent that risk from occurring later on, right? That's why we use misinformation that has been labeled, has been deemed, has been checked, has been fact-checked, snoops, panels who actually can determine that this did not originated from us. Someone else, actually external third party, try to see that there are facts and actually could disprove parts of it. But if you want to do a research where you actually, let me think of new Pizzagate, right? Pizzagate was in DC, then I'll make one in Chicago now. Deep dish Pizzagate, right? And then if that goes out, I have no control as a researcher, and that's a problem that is going to be really hard to rectify. So that's something that it's very important. Yeah, Yosh.
So the point about deception is very interesting. I've been actually engaging in user studies recently as well. And there was one point that we wanted to remove bias from the user study. So our actually main goal was to deceive people participating in a study, but actually reveal the truth afterwards. And we also had to face this, IRB approval of saying that, we have to show this kind of information afterwards. We have to get the consent of the person, whether they want to be collected, whether they want their data to be collected even after they saw this, reveal or not. And this is actually pretty interesting because if you're using like already labeled misinformation, that's already a form of bias because you're already like using what's already known. Unless that's like a very widespread misinformation, a lot of people already know what this misinformation is. And I'm really curious how you kind of got over this form of bias.
So what the two ways, that's why I included under debriefing. It is something that you control and you try a pilot study first to see so you try multiple instances, vignettes of misinformation, and see which one might give you subjectively. Of course, 2-3 researchers had to code the answers. So if you had a huge coefficient, then that's fine. But we do run a lot of tests. We ran tests with Nate Silver statistics, and we ran a test with someone else statistics, and people notice like, oh, I dislike this guy. So like, oh, okay, well then we should use someone else's account. So it's a trial and error, and it is very much topical to prove. So we submit also fact check and snoops and scientific evidence, or I don't know, WHO or CDC, how they have been debunked, to prove that actually we're not creating something that could be. Now that might seem as in the realm of science fiction, but IRBs don't know what this new protocol. I mean, they have to infer what these new protocols are, and then when you do a user studies with deception or not full disclosure, then the debriefing is like in the end of a survey, and that's fine. Many people skip after it, but in interviews, like the briefing, they ask questions about it. I'm like, whoa, hold on, can I remove my data now? So there is no silver bullet, but that's how we do it. Like we try to find the vignette from the beginning to be as not neutral, but as least as possible filled with compounding variables that could nudge a participant towards one bias or another. And when you do interviews, you have to be agnostic. Like people have named called us many times. You liberal this, you liberal that. They have, like, many people have perception of academia that's like that. So we have to immediately say, hold on, don't do this. We're not part of it. We just agnostically try to say, we allow you to revoke your participation at any time. Everything is anonymous, no video. You can use Tor, pick a link, pick a platform for interview. It's up to you. And trust is also on the longitudinal studies. So it's one thing if you do a one-shot study, but if you want to follow up with them, then there's a lot of dropout for those people who might account that you think are not.
I was curious about allowing for users to drop out. Like, could you speak to? Do they drop out?
Not many, but there are people who are concerned how it can be used. Sleep over the study, ask if they can retain the Amazon gift card. We say yes, and they feel that they want to retain, and we allow it. We are aware of it. If everyone is doing that kind of thing, you should budget for a good 10 to 15% of money that will go away just because of people might drop.
Do they ever reveal why they suddenly decide they want to?
We are not allowed per IRB to ask them why. So that's, for you to get an approval on IRB, you should, they have the right to revoke and not disclose any reasons for that. So we don't poke them. Just.
And after the debriefing, after you've debriefed them, do you ever measure or ask them, do you believe my debriefing?
No, we can't. Like, if they say I want to drop, our engagement with them stops there, because that becomes another study, right? I can report on that, and that they will tell you, well, I told you not to do it. So the moment they say done, we purge that record, and it's done. And yeah, that's similar rule for focus groups. Again, maintaining that agnostic posture, it's important.
So quick, 15 just a 15-minute warning.
Okay, good. Oh, so I don't have much, but yeah. So when you do analysis, it's, again, just briefly say, you can use tools. People use a lot of offensive language, a lot. They use analogies, so you have to know analogies. They use their lingo that I don't understand sometimes. I have to ask students, I have to ask people who know what they mean. That takes a lot of time. You can use tools, of course, for qualitative analysis and quantitative analysis too, but interpretation, it's inference helps a lot. What a person might have thought when they said or referred to. Context is important. Where are you doing this? For what particular reason we want to learn for it? Are you doing this for policy? Are you doing this for legal reasons? Are you doing this for blaming someone, or are you doing this just to understand something so you can later on have algorithmic response to it? A lot of contradictions happen. A lot of contradictory evidence happen. Those results are not reported, but that becomes a pilot, as I said, and then a main study is tried to be rectified in a main study, and then implications on what you found and how, as I said, that could change not just your sample experiences for further how they will participate, but everyone else on the platform. So this is already mentioned about this, so I will open for discussion.
Maybe this is listed in the paper, but what was it? Only open-ended questions that they were asked, or
there were questions that were multiple choice with an option to add other stuff to do, but mostly open-ended questions.
Thank you for the presentation. And did you adopt an open coding approach for the open-ended questions? And how many people did validate that? Three. Okay.
Yeah. So that's something that is important. For example, I'm not necessarily the finest non-English speaker. I try to be, but there are that matters, and sometimes I personally omit things that or make some wrong grammatical inferences. So that's very coding is very important. There are themes that you can infer, but coding is important because the people with different experiences see different things, and I have multiple times I've said oh yeah, that's the right interpretation, mine was wrong.
Yeah. And a follow-up, did you encounter a lot of people saying, I don't know, I'm not sure which questions you asked, but other user studies I did, there were oh, I don't know, have you had a lot of occurrences of people just giving these extremely generic answers, or they kind of had an opinion?
Yeah. You have to probe on certain answers for sure. We structure our questions to be more of quote unquote your opinion. So we kind of not load the question, not asking, you think quantum is an experience? You sure quantum is an experience, right? No, but there is quantum, and what is your take on it? So we try to structure them not to be loaded to prevent. Many people are, there are answers I don't know, but there are answers okay, let me tell you, and then talk and talk and talk.
It's a Laura online. Curious, it may be you covered this and I just missed it, but how many participants did you have, and what conclusions were you able to draw?
So in the paper that presented, we had 235 participants and 64 follow-up for the interview. Thank you. That's a very good thing. A very good question. We structure our research mainly through research questions and avoid hypotheses, because it's going to be very hard for us to replicate for the reasons I mentioned immediately. But our conclusions is first conclusion is that misinformation is not just falsehoods that people believe. Second conclusion is that misinformation is part of identity. I see things as defining my experiences online. And third thing is that people are much more engaging than we believed to do it. We thought that people just believe it and dismiss it, but a lot of people have proposed things that they, or reported on things that they do to either comment back or delete or report, which was far more engagement that we would have expect. We somehow had this distorted perception of a passive social media spectator, but in fact, what we found out is that people are really engaging with any kind of misinformation.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Did you collect? I assume you collected some kind of information about the participants. But I'm particularly interested in like ideology, and I think earlier I heard you say that as far as the perception of fairness or unfairness, that seemed to go across the board. Were you seeing basically the same thing in what you just discussed, regardless of what side of the fence people fell on?
Yeah, in the paper I report the political attitudes into every time I quote a participant. So we do collect demographic data on those things. We did not report on the percentages for the reason that could get into. We didn't want it to sound that we have some kind of authoritative thing, because we want to replicate it first to have a actual reporting on that. But there is the general. I could say that generally the political split is the most potent one into how people act around it. So it really it's part of your identity, but it also closely not very, but closely synergistic to how people see themselves onto their political attitude. So it is, social media creates a perception, a persona for them, and that persona is maintained cross platforms. In some platforms, people participate much more. So we found participants who are widely active on Reddit, and they just monitor stuff that happens on Twitter, and the other way around. But nonetheless, they do see and are attracted to misinformation, in part because it either confirms or kind of makes them recoil if it's not aligned to what they personally believe.
So, not to totally monopolize the floor. So one other question is what do you plan to do with the results from your work here? I mean, this is really fascinating. Do you see this informing like the people who run social media platforms, policymakers?
Yeah.
Who is the target for this?
Yeah, we, as I said at the beginning, we were inspired to do this because we were running studies with how you warn user that something might be a misinformation or not. So I think this is a good work to start thinking of how you will probably shape what kind of warning and what kind of suggestion. Maybe warning is not the right word. What kind of suggestion and what kind of change in an interface you could create on social media, so you can have the user dismiss something more probably than they could do it now. Because now, and I have seen changes happening across, for example, Twitter. They used to have those little warnings, for example, like get the facts about XYZ. Now they have big context that's written there, but there is far more to do because, again, as you asked and I mentioned before, that perception of unfairness of the platform, it's hard to rectify, and I think this could inform very much how you approach different types of users. I don't think that now moderation strategies and moderation policies discriminate between types of users and between types of quote-unquote social media diets, but this could really be helpful into having tailored, let's use that word, way of how you handle what might be factual or not and how they can consume it on your platform. Of course, alternative platforms don't deal with anything of this, right? They let everything go. But there is a fair notion of people who like to maintain presence on the mainstream platforms. That's why they're mainstream. And it's worth the cause to proceed and see how interventions can help. Use these findings to kind of make a better way of the experience on the platform. That's where I see where this could go.
All right, I thank you. I understand Theodore has a question.
Yeah, that's right. My original question was already answered because you had a very similar one, but now I have some kind of follow-up to the recent discussion here. Where did you do all those studies? Were they mostly US focused?
Yeah, this is mostly US focused. So
because I would be interested in finding out or learning how these results can be transferred to other regions, because misinformation is, for example, also a topic in Europe, I guess, and I'm from Germany, especially in Germany, but I don't know if all of that can be directly transferred, because you mentioned all those alternative platforms and that people go to specific platforms for specific themes. But I mean, I'm not into this, but I would say that all those platforms like Parler, Getter, Truth Social, I'm not sure if they're really that much of a thing in other regions of the world.
True, there might not be there, but you could transfer it based on, start with a topic-wise, and then see if all the models are there. Maybe some of there are there, some of there are not. Many in our study we did not measure, and we plan to measure further on how, which one, how many people maintain in one moment, and what's the switch that they switch between them. So, but you have to probably run topic-wise, to start topic-wise, and then kind of use through trial and error which one works to see, is this what people feel in Germany about misinformation? Because I think that misinformation in Germany, for example, for the Ukrainian conflict, is differently perceived and talked about than there is in the US, or there is in Japan, or there is in, let's say, Philippines, right? Because of it, you're implicated with it. It's much more on the news. So that actually factors into people's how do they approach to it. And to your point, personal experiences from before, that interaction experiences shape how they look information. So I think you have to do sort of quasi-replication and start it from there. I think I have a feeling that it's contextual to a particular culture, and to put maybe not the borders of Germany per se, but a particular culture.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, can we thank our speaker?